there, this is Alvin, and welcome to the Kickstart Commerce podcast, where we share search marketing and domain investing strategies to help grow your business. In today's episode, our guest is none other than Jebidiah Burnett, senior domain consultant at Donuts Inc. And so today, Jebidiah will share with us how he got his start as a domain broker, as well as what it takes to be a successful domain broker. In addition, he'll give us the inside scoop on brokering the $500,000 sale of Home.Loans, as well as a few other notable sales. Last but not least, he'll share with us why more and more companies are using new top-level domains to represent their brand. So, Jebidiah, welcome to the show here, man.
Thank you, Alvin. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. And like I said, I know that you're probably heads down trying to work on the next deal. So I definitely appreciate your time. So if you don't mind, tell our listeners, who you are, your domain industry experience, and your role at Donuts.
Sure. Absolutely. So as you mentioned, I'm Jebidiah Burnett. I'm the senior domain consultant for the Donuts Registry, Donuts Inc. We operate 239 unique domain extensions across a numerous amount of different verticals, from .live to .social, .accountants, .cruises, and then obviously .loans, .mortgage. So quite a few different opportunities for businesses and entrepreneurs out there. And I've been with the Donuts Registry technically for about a year now. The Donuts Registry acquired the Right Side Registry, which I was a part of. And I've been with Right Side since its inception for about 5 years.
Gotcha. So then, how in the world did you get into domain name brokering? I mean, one doesn't go to school or college for this type of a thing. So, how did you?
No, I did not. So I actually began with Enom Name Services as the registrar. I was on the retail sales team with Enom. I worked with just account holders to secure value-added services, and started looking at people's domain names or clients' domain names, realizing more times than not there was a lot better of an opportunity for them. So with my successes doing that through Enom, at that time Enom was part of the Right Side family. So when the new TLD program rolled out, I was asked, I guess would be a good way to put it. But I was asked to sort of take on that role with Enom and Right Side and start taking a look at premium and platinum level new TLD domain names and working with clients in regards to those. And so I sort of took that on, realized to me that it just made perfect sense. When someone has options, it's always good for them. And so the new TLDs provide options. So sort of just kind of started rolling with that. And then, like I mentioned, I was with Right Side. And then when Right Side got acquired by Donuts, I continued that service with Donuts and opened up even more options. Right Side had 40 extensions. Now with Donuts, we're at 239.
So I guess you would say your background has really been in sales then, I guess, for most of
absolutely.
your
Yeah,
career.
Absolutely. So yeah, I've done everything from event sales to jewelry sales to I was a mortgage broker for a while. My background is very deep in sales oriented services. So.
Gotcha. So why domains? I know obviously you got your start there at Enom, but what made you go, yeah, I can actually do this?
I think I really enjoyed, first off, again, like when I said, when people have options, it's sort of a fun thing to do. You get to go over options with people, and I really enjoyed that. I like the technology side of it. I like that the the landscape is always changing. There's unique opportunities and differences almost on a daily basis to take into consideration. There's the thought process behind a domain name and a brand or a business opportunity online that I just love working with my clients with. It progressed from just selling premium domain names to end users or something like that to actually working with my clients in creating brands or in creating a legacy for them with that brand or with that opportunity. And so that really spoke to me, and I've been doing it and loving every minute of it since. So I've had, when we acquired name.com, we've talked about hosting and other value added services in the past, but I keep coming back to, just really loving premium and platinum level domain names, working with clients on that level. And so I really am a firm believer in doing what you love, and I love doing it. So it's been a lot of fun.
That's great. And so do you recall like the first name you ever brokered?
I do. It was, I don't remember the full name, but I remember it had to do with horse colic.
Wow.
It was a 5-figure domain name. It had to do with horse colic, and it cracked me up because I knew nothing about horse colic. So I remember researching with my client, cost per click value on the domain name, valuable keyword search information, things along those lines with my client on horse colic because I had no clue. And I think that also reinforced my passion of learning about my client and what their needs are. And doing that research, because you learn, it's a multi-million-dollar industry out there, horse colic. So who knew?
Really?
And apparently like remedies and cures and treatments and it was pretty insane, but it was a great time. I remember it. I remember my client being extremely happy that they were able to secure the name, and just kind of started running from there.
Wow, that's interesting. So then you mentioned a couple of things there. So then you really had to become well versed, not only I guess in terms of business development, but even likely search marketing, search engine optimization, e-commerce, so forth. As you've progressed throughout your domain broker career.
Correct. Yeah. There are a lot of times where you'll have clients that you're working with that are trying to start a brand or, build that brand online. And, search volume may not necessarily be of that great importance to them. But other times, it's of significant importance. They need to know that owning a domain name that has valuable keywords in there are going to be relevant and are going to be search worthy are tremendous assets for people buying or clients buying platinum and premium level domain names. So having that knowledge about SEO, SEM is key.
Wow. So then how do you go from, brokering, I think you said, what was it, a 4 or 5 figure name that was based around horse colic to something like $500,000 Home.Loans?
Well, I think the progression is twofold. I think any good domain broker is going to want to challenge themselves and want to push forward. And the other side of it is you find domain names that have significant value, and you work with people to promote that value of those domains. And in the case of Home.Loans, it was sort of a great storm that came together of Blake Janover, who has significant success with .loans domain names with things like multifamily.loans, and a great domain name like Home.Loans that had a niche in the market that could be capitalized on. And then again, you start looking at keyword value on those search terms, and then the opportunity arises and the value outweighs the cost. And so at that point, you're looking at, $500,000 domain name. And when all sides come together to realize that value is there, then the deal closes. And that's what happened with that one.
Right. So then, what's interesting. So I attended NamesCon 2018, and obviously they had an auction there. And one of the things that I noticed, I believe it was business.loans that was in auction. And so it kind of surprised me. And I don't know I don't recall what business.loans closed at. However, it definitely was significantly different than Home.Loans. And so it kind of, it made me wonder in terms of, is that the difference in brokering a name versus putting a name in auction? It's like
I
with a
think,
broker, is it
yeah.
higher or value add services that somewhat drive that value, or what is it that would cause something quite the discrepancy there between the two?
Yeah, I think there's going to be multiple aspects to that. I think having a broker on a domain name is going to be significantly better for both sides, both the buyer and the seller. You are going to, a good broker will increase the value and will increase the value to both sides, buyer and seller. The value to the buyer and getting the best price possible for them, and the buyer to the seller for getting the best price possible for them. And so when you have a domain name like business.loans, it's a phenomenal, domain name. But when you look at market, when you look at who that domain name speaks to, I really consider domain names as a pie, and how big is that pie that people can eat from. And the domain name business.loans is obviously specific to, businesses. They need to get liquid. They need capital to promote their business. Home loans, I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but you have a significant larger population across the globe that are doing searches for home loans or doing business for home loans than you're doing for business loans. So I think that when you take a look at long-term opportunity or even short-term opportunity in some cases, the domain name is the significant factor and the quality of that domain name. And I think, like I said, I think business.loans is a great domain name. I just think the market is a little bit smaller than what you would find with home loans. And so you're going to see, a difference in value there, difference in price there.
No, that makes sense. That definitely makes sense, having that explanation. And so in terms of, I guess you'd say in terms of Home.Loans, now, I myself, I look at the new top level domains, and I own a handful, but I also own the matching.com. And so would you say that it's necessary, for instance, in this case, Home.Loans, that it's necessary for brands to own the matching? So it'd be Home.Loans.com in this case. Is that necessary?
I don't think it's necessary. No, I think that with the case of home loans, I think it's a perfect example of it's not necessary. And why I say that is because Blake has, been very, very vocal that Home.Loans is the brand name to home loans. And so moving forward, having a .com version of that doesn't speak to his brand. So it's irrelevant to him. Now, there are certainly companies out there that may need or may feel that they need the .com or any other legacy TLD extension for that matter. That's up to the business. But I don't think it's necessary to always have to have that .com version. Again, with home loans, it's the price that home loans sold for. Just based on market, you're looking at, I believe it was Wells Fargo owns the .com version. They're not letting that go. So, is it worth Blake reaching out and going into, mid to high seven figures for a domain name that doesn't speak to his brand? I would say no. So I believe that owning multiple versions of your domain name can be important, but I think it's a business decision that you have to take under serious consideration, not just assume right out of the gate that you have to own every single legacy extension with your new TLD.
Oh, that's actually great insight there, and so like you said, so Blake, he's using Home.Loans as the brand, but then what would be, I guess, the other side of the story, that if someone came to you, and that they were trying to purchase a domain that I guess necessarily wasn't the brand. So it just may be
Mhm.
keywords. Then is that, I guess, that opportunity of using a .com over a new top level domain?
Well, I don't think it needs to be used over. I think if you're trying to protect a brand or build a brand, or if you're registering a domain name that's keyword relevant, and you want to secure those keywords, if the opportunity addresses itself or presents itself to register a legacy TLD and you choose to make that decision, then that's your choice. I am a believer that new TLDs are shorter, they're more concise. We're seeing a lot of information that shows that those keyword searches through a variety of different search engines are read easily. Read easily. So if you're, registering a domain name based on keyword search, what better way than a shorter, more concise version? Something that does, with a dot, maybe split it, or something like, for example, like Bitcoin for sale might be a great example. There's no reason to throw on additional letters or additional, non-meaning to that domain name. If you're selling Bitcoin, Bitcoin for sale is a perfect example of that. The keywords are there, the search terms are there, and then it's just what you want to do with the domain name as far as website or whatnot after that. So um, that was a long answer for probably a shorter question, but
No.
I just believe, that it, me personally, if I'm building a brand, I don't think I would need to go out and get a legacy TLD like a .com to go with it, or even with a keyword domain name. I don't think I would need to go do that. If the opportunity presented itself down the line to secure those keywords in a different form, then obviously as a good business decision, you would review that. But I don't think there's a dire need to go get that stuff. No.
No, that makes perfect sense, and I think it's interesting because you had mentioned dot for sale, and I believe when you and I had reconnected there in DN Seattle a little over a year ago, you had either just sold a couple of dot for sale domain names, correct?
Yeah. Homes and Houses.ForSale.
Right, right. And I remember it being a topic there at DN meetup at how, who would necessarily pay for, I believe they were what, $90,000 each or something like that, if I recall
Yeah, it was
correctly.
not each. It was $90,000 for the both.
For both, for total. Um, so it's one of those things that you had mentioned Bitcoin dot for sale, but then obviously you had, I guess you'd say the couple there for sale. So how did those dot for sale domains come out? Because obviously that's been a year since Home.Loans occurred. So tell us a little bit how those came to be.
How the sales come to be, or what's going on with them now?
Correct.
So,
Actually both.
both, yeah. So the sales came to be actually very similar to home loans. It was a client of mine that was looking to build a brand, to build a opportunity online for themselves, and they felt that the keyword specific domain names spoke to what their mission was. And again, we go back to being short, concise, easy to read, and easy to remember. And those are all things that almost every brand in the world is begging people to pay attention to. Is my brand short? Is it concise? Do people remember who I am, and do they remember what I do? And something like Homes.ForSale just made perfect sense for what their brand was or what their project was. They're still building that project. I believe they are scheduled to be launching sometime this year. I don't want to speak to that because I don't want to put them in too much of a bind by giving the wrong information without having it off the top of my head. But yeah, they are very much excited for what they're seeing through their development and through their testing processes, and where they're going to be launching and how they're launching it. It's an exciting time for them, that I know. And again, the brand built the name, and then the name will turn around and build the brand.
No, that's it. That's definitely interesting. And so with those two sales, and obviously you've likely had a few more under your belt. Um, so I guess Donuts as a company, or even you as a broker, you're starting to see more and more companies using top level domains to represent their brand. And so I guess what types of companies, if you can speak to that you're seeing starting to use top level domains.
Sure, sure. Well, like you said, we are seeing, we're seeing all levels of new brands or businesses use top level domain names. I mean, from the biggest players in the industry like McDonald's and T-Mobile and Amazon to small and medium sized businesses just trying to find their niche online. And what's great about that is with the way that the new TLDs have entered the market and how there are options for each one of those levels of brands. So, anything from that small mom and pop pizza shop down the street to Pizza Hut, or similar examples across the spectrum. I'm having conversations on a daily basis with each level of that business category. So it's an exciting time when you have sort of from a marketing perspective or you from a business development perspective, there's kind of a new toy in the toy box. And you're working with brands to figure out how to use that toy, what's best with other brands, or how are we going to capitalize on what we do by using a new top level domain. And it's great to see all of those brands embrace and start to use them in a large, meaningful way. And I think over the next 3 to 9 months, you're going to see a lot more of those and a lot bigger versions. So we're excited for that.
And is that more so in terms of starting to see more companies use new top level domains? Then I guess I kind of come back to, are we entering that change, or have we entered that change of guard? Because I believe also you and we had a conversation just in terms of how I believe it was your son who had a school project and wound up using a new top level domain. And so it's one of those things that is it the question of, hey, younger and younger markets are not caring so much about what's at the end of a domain.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, I'll share that story that I shared with you, just kind of give reference to it. So my son, who was or is in high school now, in one of their classes was required to build a website. And he built his website and he showed it to me, and it was done on a .ninja domain name. And I asked him, hey, did you choose a .ninja because Dad represents those, or what? And he's like, no, I don't know what you do. And we kind of had a chuckle about that. And then he said, but it's cool and I like it. And to me, that was the epiphany moment, like really more so than anything, that like you just mentioned, generation to generation, there are going to be differences in how we view things. And when the internet started, it was .com. That's the one that took off. That became kind of the go-to. Well, now I don't think that the next generation of internet users or technology users really care. So it's a perfect opportunity for the savvy investor and the savvy business owner to take advantage of that sort of changing of the guard, as you will, and look not necessarily at just today, but what end users are going to be doing a year from now, 2 years from now, and even more so, who those end users are and what they're doing. And I think that that epiphany moment just showed to me again, new TLDs, they're simple, they're easy to understand, they are a domain name. They are here to stay. They are being used. The search engines have said, hey, they're domain names. We'll treat them just the same. So, there's really no reason to not look at those and to not gain information or insight from them moving forward. I think that, when the TLD program launched, came to market a couple of years ago, about 3 years ago, I think there was this hesitation that people had of, okay, well, what's going to happen with these? And we're just seeing too many people embrace them and too many brands embrace them. And I think that the ball is really starting to gain momentum. And I think it's only going to get much, much bigger from here.
Right. And so, obviously you have companies that are, coming online. So, you have startups that are getting started and whatnot. But then in terms of existing brands, like, do you recommend existing brands even entertaining or even developing a plan around the new TLDs?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. What's great about the new TLDs is that, again, it gives you options, but at the same time, it also allows you to sort of categorize what it is you're trying to get to your clients or to your customers. And with new TLDs, there's so many great uses for those in reaching specific segments of your market. So things like .social for your social presence on like Facebook or Instagram, where you can use like URL shorteners or short links to send the people that you want to that specific content that you want, or things like .live or .video that, we've seen great success with .live as an example with like Nitro Circus or even Joe Rogan, the comedian and UFC personality was using Joe Rogan .live. And it was set up specifically for any time he went live, that domain name became his call to action for his YouTube and Twitter followers. Check me out at joerogan.live. And so when you take a look at the landscape of what the new TLDs have, businesses can really capitalize on speaking to their targeted market with new TLDs. And I think that's one of the biggest opportunities that people, domain investors can take advantage of as well. Obviously, I putting my legal jargon in there, I don't recommend registering trademarked terms or being unsavvy that way. But, there are generic terms that could be used really, really well and by lots of brands across the spectrum. So there are avenues that brands can really, really use these new TLDs to their advantage. And we're seeing really smart, savvy companies start to do that already. And it's working out very, very well for them.
Right, because the new TLDs, I guess, because of whatever's to the right of the dot, no pun intended, it's one of those things that you look at it and you say, okay, well, if I can get closer to a term that my target market identifies with, then it's likely less explanation, I would assume. And people just probably recognize it.
They recognize it, or it could be, it could be something that like a new brand launch that you have, or it's easy to read, so they're comfortable with it. A lot of times we'll see these hyperlinks or something crazy out there where if you're in the internet landscape or you're in the internet industry, you understand what that hyperlink is and what all those letters and characters and numbers mean, and you're comfortable clicking on it or going to that website. Well, there are still a large segment of the community that are not. But imagine if that reads something like, T-Mobile.news, and you just click on that, and all of a sudden you're getting all the news about the new Apple iPhone that's out, or their new plans or whatever it is. There are tremendous ways to use that ease of readability to your brand's advantage. And a great SEO artist, Bill Hartzer, has done case studies on that, on the ease of readability and your conversion rate. And, we speaking to consumers and end users at, numerous conferences that I go to throughout the year, and just on the phone with, people interested in domain names. That's one of their biggest reasons in looking at new TLDs as well, is they love that ease of readability. So, there's just, again, it always comes back to options and opportunities for me. And those are just two examples, the readability and so forth. So absolutely.
So then how does a company then that's looking to get started, like what do you recommend in terms of getting started, getting down the path of using new TLDs to represent your brand?
Well, I think, every conversation starts with what are we hoping to achieve? Like I mentioned, I don't just really broker domain names. I work with my clients to figure out what domain names are going to work best for what they're hoping to achieve. And, so you always want to start that conversation of, are you trying to gain traffic? Are you just trying to get brand visibility? Or are you trying to create a brand new brand? And so once we decide, or I get information on that, on what we're doing in step 2, 3, and 4 of that process, then I know what domain names we should be looking at. What keywords or what specific extensions we should be looking at. If we're trying to, hey, I'm launching this new product and I'm putting it on sale and I want everybody to see it. Well, there's .sale, there's .ForSale, there's .market, there's technology. There's so many options there to look at. So we want to take a look at what segment of that population do we want to attract the most. And then from there, your brand can start taking a look at how do you want to promote that brand? How do you want to drive people to that brand or to that website? What content do you want to get to those people? And that all encompasses what domain names we start looking at. So that's step 1 through 6 or so in that process. And then once we decide on the domain name, then we go to work to getting it secured for you.
Gotcha. And is that typically, what would you say is an average? And I know that they're all different, but what would be like an average timeline from the initial contact until domain is secured? Sometimes it's, I imagine, days or weeks or maybe months.
Yeah, it can be, I would say it's anywhere between weeks to months, depending on, again, to put it bluntly, the price point of the domain name. Usually domain names are a little bit higher priced, tend to take a little bit longer. But at the same time, I've certainly worked with clients where we've secured, mid 5-figure domain names, and those took 6 months to almost a year. It just depends. But I would say, a couple of months, or a couple of weeks to a couple of months are usually the typical turn times. So.
Gotcha. So shifting gears here then, in terms of being an experienced domain broker, now obviously, in terms of our listening community, there are many people who are coming into domain investing for the first time, just kind of understanding and I guess you'd say getting their sea legs under them, if you will. What would you recommend in terms of domain investors that may be looking at a path of domain brokering?
Well, I think first and foremost, if you're getting into, so that's kind of two questions. What if you're getting your sea legs with domain investing, how do I approach domain investing? And then based on that domain investing, how do I approach brokering my names? And I think when it comes to domain investing, especially if you have an eye towards brokering them, one of the things that I encourage very heavily is make sure that you're getting into a vertical or a genre that you actually enjoy. One of the best experiences I had is I started doing that. I got into the legal genre when I first started brokering, and I really enjoyed the legal genre. And so it made it easy for me to talk to prospective clients about it. And it's the same thing. If you're investing in domain names, I encourage you to invest in things that you actually may enjoy, like a hobby or an advertising vertical that you enjoy or something like that. Simply for when it comes to brokering them, you are able to convey that passion to your prospective buyer. Secondly, definitely be precise on what you're investing in. If you have an eye towards the future of what you want to resell, keyword domain names are great, but sometimes people can go a little overboard and start adding extra words or putting in, longer tail domain names, and they get longer and longer and longer. And then you have to kind of start to explain what that domain name means or something like that. I heard, a great domain investor once told me or once said, if you have to explain the domain name, you're not going to be able to sell it. And I took that really to heart. If you have to explain the meaning of a domain name to someone, that may not be the best opportunity for a domain investment. And then, go within your own guidelines of your budget and what you're anticipating. I don't know how many times I've seen domain investors kind of go down that rabbit hole, so to speak, and just keep buying and buying and buying and buying and buying with no strategy to sell. And they outbuy themselves within, the first year, and then they're stuck. So be cautious on what you're looking at, but I always like to say be surgically precise on what you want to buy, knowing that you want to sell it. Do your research on them. And then as far as brokering goes, just you're invested in your own domain names. So remember that when it comes to selling the domain names, a good value to you or a good sale price to you is obviously not going to necessarily be that to the buyer. So you want to make sure that you're able to approach those open-minded, know what you have invested, know what the domain's worth, and know what you can take for the domain name, and be solid with yourself and know that for sure before you enter a negotiation.
Wow. And that's great. I mean, that is definitely great insight for both domain investing as well as brokering. A bit back to the domain investing side. So, have you been approached by domain investors who have, I guess you'd say, over invested in the new TLDs? And then what is that experience? What has your advice been to them? Because obviously with the new TLDs, you have more opportunity of putting things together that either should go together or ought not to go together.
I have seen, I've seen domain registrations. I've seen lists of people who have bought domain names and are looking for brokerage help. And you kind of look at them and you wonder, what was going on that day that made you decide to register these. But, at the end of the day, there is a market for almost any domain name. What that market may be, general availability pricing, what you paid for it. So, to answer the first question, yes, I've been approached by or sent portfolios by people who may have bought stuff that they probably shouldn't have, just as far as quality of domain names who are looking for that. But I've also been approached by a lot of people who have registered some really, really good new domain names, new TLD domain names. And the thing that I encourage with everyone is patience right now. The market is really starting to mature. Again, if we remember that the new TLDs launched or came to market 3 years ago, that there was obviously the first wave of domain names or domain investors who came in and just started buying everything and like, hey, these are great, and buy. Well, because they were new, that secondary market wasn't quite mature enough yet. So we are starting to see that happen now, and it's very, very exciting. We're seeing a lot of aftermarket sales. I've been involved in quite a few sales from domain investors that have sold to end users already for, they went from a general availability purchase price from $30, $40 to 5-figure sales, a year and a half after registration. So that's awesome. We're really excited about that. The over-investing side of it, that's tough for me to say because that's up to each investor. If you're over-invested, that was a personal choice, a personal financial choice. And, it's hard from a broker's perspective to be able to classify that or to tell someone that. So that's sort of their decision there.
No, that makes perfect sense. And so, hey man, we're nearing the end of this podcast. And so is there anything else that you'd like to share, whether it's pertaining to your domain brokering experience, whether it's to help others or just even about donuts? Anything you'd like to share?
Sure. Well, I mean, again, I like to talk about opportunities and options, and I think that we're kind of on this great cusp right now of how domain names interact with, like my biggest top 10 ideas are, with voice recognition right now. We are seeing things like Alexa and Google Home and Siri and these technologies that are really starting to flow out at a fire hose pace, and how domain names interact with that. And, I've done some personal, A/B testing on domain names, new TLDs with specific keyword endings or specific keyword SLDs. And it's pretty exciting what you can see. So, that's definitely something I would encourage both brokers and domain investors to look at. How do these do with voice search? As far as experience goes, I'm just very blessed to be, on the Donuts team. I'm excited for where this company is situated at and where we're going. It's fun to look at, the top 20 new TLD domain sales and know that, as an industry or as a company, we have, I think last time I looked, we had around 8 of the top 20. And then, personal bragging rights, I have 4 of the top 20 that I've brokered personally.
Congrats.
That are on the list. Thank you. It's exciting. There is a change in the mentality on new TLDs from both businesses and end users, and it's exciting if you're able to sort of, for lack of a better term, take advantage of that changing of the tide right now. I think both as a domain investor and as a domain broker, you can be very successful.
Right. You mentioned the change of the tide, and that's one of the things I think that I'd ask you in terms of the pre-interview questions was, in your opinion, how long should a domain investor be willing to invest at minimum?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and I take that question as, how long should I hang on to my domain names? And I think there was this sort of, I think that, 2 to 3 years is a good time frame if you want to be, quote unquote, quick with your domain flips. I think, 2 to 3 years is what you should be prepared for. I think that there, and if give me a little leeway here, Alvin, I apologize. There's some misconceptions with some really high level, high quality domain names that they have, $50,000 purchase price with a $50,000 annual renewal. And that is actually not the case with any of the Donuts extensions. So there are opportunities to hold like really, really good premium domain names for a long period of time with, a really big upside. And when you look at holding on to a portfolio or holding on to a domain name, you want to give yourself the opportunity to sell the domain name to the right end user. That's how you're going to get, the best value for yourself. And if you put yourself under an 11-month deadline, that's really tough. That's tough to do. So I encourage all of my domain investors to take a look at your, a minimum of 2 to 3 years and then, go from there. Now, do I think the tide is turning today? Absolutely. I think, the fact that my phone rings and my emails are coming in constantly for people looking to do something in this space, that to me is it's a big difference from where it was 3 years ago. So I'm excited for where that's going. We're seeing major brands, entities, and new technology. Just throwing this out here, a lot of the new blockchain companies or a lot of the new cryptocurrency companies are actually running on new TLDs. And so, they're thinking outside of the box. They're thinking of ways to be unique. And that, that's the next step of technology. So we, there's certainly going to be opportunities if you're willing to hold for, a little bit longer, 2 to 3 years or so.
No, that makes total perfect sense there. And so with that, that'll conclude the Kickstart Commerce podcast. And so, Jebidiah, man, I appreciate you for taking time out, for sharing your insight, your stories, and just your experience. So thank you.
Hey, my pleasure.
Yeah, and so
thank you so much for having me.
Definitely. And so we'll include Jebidiah's contact information there below the podcast, should some of you want to get in contact with him. And as well, I encourage you to subscribe to this podcast, as well as to visit kickstartcommerce.com and subscribe to our weekly newsletter there, where we share search marketing and domain investing strategies to help grow your business. And so that's it for this episode.